Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Theresa May has given an interview to Radio 5 Live this morning. She became Prime Minister a year ago today, and this is what she had to say to Emma Barnett.
I felt, I suppose, devastated, really, because as I say, I knew the campaign wasn't going perfectly, but still the messages I was getting from people I was speaking to, but also the comments we were getting back from a lot of people that were being passed on to me, were that we were going to get a better result than we did.
Devastated enough to shed a tear?
Yes, a little tear.
Yes. At that moment,
At that moment, yes.
And then you obviously have to just brush yourself down.
You have a responsibility. That's, you're a human being. You've been through that experience. But I was, there as leader of the party and Prime Minister, and I had a responsibility then to, as we went through the night, to determine what we were going to do the next morning.
Prime Minister's talking to Radio 5 Live. She's also been talking to Tom Newton-Dunn of The Sun. That rhymes. Tom Newton-Dunn of The Sun. And he interviewed Theresa May yesterday. He joins us now. Welcome to the programme. Ed Vasey, is this an attempt to project a more human Theresa May?
Well, I think Theresa May is human. I was listening to the interview this morning, and I think that she is, one of the reasons that...
Did you just say you think she's human?
That she's human. Theresa May is human.
Quick recovery.
One of the things that I felt when I was listening to the radio this morning was that, she walked on water before this election. And one of the reasons that people liked her was because she is understated and does, to coin a phrase, get on with the job. And I think it is perhaps a frustration for her that the modern political scene requires, to put it bluntly, a lot of kind of emoting in public, and she is, I think, uncomfortable with that. In private, she's not. So I think that I'm giving her my full support. I've said that consistently in every interview I've done, that I will support her for as long as she wants to remain Prime Minister. But as I said earlier, certainly on an issue like Europe, I would like to see her reach out more and understand the dilemmas and difficulties that people who don't necessarily support the kind of very hard Brexit want. But, across the piece in her manifesto in the election, even though we didn't get the result we deserved, there was a lot of policies in there driven by her which are about helping people who don't get a great deal out of life.
But there was a lot of comment about that. The actual policies were quite hard to divine at some stage. Vasey's put an interesting spin on what happened. Would it not be truer to say that the British people thought they liked her, but that's because they didn't know her? The moment they got to know her during the election campaign, they decided they didn't really like her.
It's very hard to analyse. I think that one thing is very clear. It wasn't the best campaign, and frankly the manifesto itself was very disappointing. And,
but she was the campaign and she was the manifesto.
I think to personalise it to that extent is maybe unfair.
But she did that. All the election posters at the start of the campaign, the word Conservative was in 6-point type. Well, it was May. Team May. May. She was there, and the Chancellor was missing in action. I think we saw him once. Other cabinet ministers were nowhere to be seen. She personalised it.
I concede it was not the best of campaigns, but I do have to say that the manifesto, I think, was what caused us the biggest problems, and I think anybody campaigning during that election would be able to say that the day after the manifesto was published, things changed.
You interviewed the Prime Minister for your paper. Did you go to Downing Street
in her study in number 10?
In number 10. How did you find her? Was she different? Is she trying to be different?
She was actually, yes, and your initial analysis is absolutely right. She was actually, although you won't necessarily believe if you read all those slightly tightly constructed words we wrote from her this morning, she was straining at the bit to be different, not answer the same question with the same phraseology 15 times in a row, which is her favourite trick, talk in a human language, try and also admit humility, admit, you know, quite blatantly where she went wrong in the campaign, whether it was over the manifesto, or I think actually a slightly more accurate description of what went wrong, having a manifesto which she completely failed to sell, that just didn't add up to this sort of quite hard, you know, Brexit campaign that she did. There's an essential untruth with the campaign. And you saw with the Emma Barnett interview this morning as well, you know, actually admitting she cried. I didn't feel brave enough to put that to her as a 6-foot-tall, hairy-bottomed male political editor sitting in her own study saying, did you weep, Prime Minister? It was slightly beyond me, and I kicked myself for that. But she's trying desperately hard to be different. It just comes incredibly difficult to her because she's so shy.
Did she not also, at least implicitly, maybe even more than that to you, admit that she's unlikely, or she will not be leading the Conservative Party into the next election?
Yeah, that came across very strongly. Repeatedly I asked her, Prime Minister, do you intend to fight another general election as party leader? Do you intend to be here in 2 years' time, 1 year's time? And she refused to put any date on anything, made it very clear she wasn't going to be around in 2022, I thought. But repeatedly the phrase kept on coming up when I went back through the transcript of, you know, I want to do a job for a few years. There's a job to do here for a few more years, And it felt like to me that Brexit, she wants to stay and see that through. It's the mess that she says she's got us into. It's the mess she says she wants to get us out of. But after then, she'll move off.
And that is the mood of the Conservative backbenches, isn't it? That they don't necessarily want her to go now, partly because they can't agree who would replace her. There's no consensus on that. But they don't think she should fight another election, and that maybe if she survives that long, completing the Article 50 talks would be a natural time to go. That's the mood I pick up. Is that accurate?
Yep. I mean, I said that I would support her as long as she wants to be Prime Minister. It sounds a bit pompous when I keep saying that. But the received wisdom... Thanks, Douglas.
It does actually.
We're all nodding sagely. We're all nodding sagely at that.
Disagreement here.
You know, what is the phrase? Hairy-bottom pomposity. I don't know. But,
I don't think we need to repeat that.
But it's definitely the truth. Objectively, the truth is that the received wisdom in Westminster is that she would spend 2 years seeing through Brexit and then depart. But that is the mood. That is the mood in the tea room.
Is it good or bad news for Labour that Mrs May stays?
I can't see how she could fight another election. No harm to Tom's journalism, but the dogs in the street know that Theresa May is not going to fight the next general election. And I think the working assumption within the Labour Party must now be that it will be an alternative leader of the Conservative Party who fights the next general election.
There is one more reason why I think she will stay for a couple more years that these two esteemed Conservative MPs won't tell you, and that's because they are terrified what would happen if she moves up. She's managed to put this plaster over these two wings of the party, perfectly represented by David and Ed here. She goes, they are terrified of what they may do to each other. They may club each other to pieces.
And pave the way for another snap election,
and
which they fear they would lose.
And just presenting this open civil war to the country would be so ugly, I think they would lose even more authority.
It's a tough job for Miss... I mean, she brought it on herself, but it is a tough job because in a sense she's now being asked to do a form of penance, which is to deliver Brexit as best she can to the satisfaction of the majority in the House, but will get none of the benefits of it, because when she's done that, she's then expected to go. That's quite tough in the tough world of politics.
I disagree. I think if you're somebody as ambitious as she is to become Prime Minister, she knows if she goes now, her only legacy will be loss of majority. She could secure an Article 50 conclusion, which will give her a different place in history.
What do you say to that as a final comment?
I think that a legacy of taking Britain out of the European Union on successful terms would be something that should be very
And then going?
I think that that's the time when she would probably consider it.
OK, and you would have time if the Parliament lasts
just,
before election. We're very briefly because we need to move on.
I'm the number one member of the David Jones fan club.
You are?
The idea that we would ever...
Well, if we're having...
Exactly.
If we're having this sort of sick-inducing unanimity breaking out in the Tory party.
Hey, we're speaking my constituency only the other day.
We're not continuing.
You should look on his face.
We're not here to help you get along. But I thank you both for being here.
But we do.
Tom, thank you for that. Well done on getting that interview.